and this second World Innovations Forum Digital Conference with a keynote address on the future of nations. Axel's main point, as you will see, is that yes, size matters, but bigger is no longer better. Globalization is no longer about massive market access, but about intelligent access to resources. At the end of the pandemic that we're experiencing, many different nations and their innovative actions may influence the future of all economies. And I think we can say that we've seen a couple of examples, for example, from Nepal today. Size seems to be a growing challenge to stay agile and competitive, yet the future is smaller, but also global. So Axel, thank you very much. We see your presentation, and so I will basically say the next 15 minutes or so are yours.
All righty, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And yeah, let me start this closing keynote actually with a big thank you for an amazing job. Those who have been with us in the first version of it in 2018 may have noticed a couple differences. Both went smooth, but this one went like a Swiss clockwork. I think we mentioned this term before, and we had also amazing support, more than we had ever before, from our ambassadors, and we had amazing support actually from those with the smallest country. So we'll get back to the ambassadors later in a separate email and thank you note, but I want to make this a public big thank you to those who actually represent the World Innovation Forum and its spirit in the world. Now we're a team of 4, and we're an extended team of about 5 more here in Switzerland. But the entire group has grown over 100 people who actually contribute their own time aside of all and everything they do to make their country go forward, and that is amazing support. And when we talk about countries, I would like to share this picture of a futuristic country, and actually a couple of words about the future of countries. We were, as you know, looking always for what can we do to make it happen, and I think I can summarize it in 2 factors: empowerment and collaboration. These 2 are significant to the rise of a nation, of any nation ever have been created since about 7,000 years. Empowerment for innovation is sort of a new attribute to it, and globalization is something we have been living in for a while. We have been questioning for a while, because in the past, globalization was more or less about access to markets and driving markets, leveraging markets, getting into this market and so forth. But I believe down the road as intelligent people that globalization is basically intelligent access to resources, and it's English. And I mention English for one reason. Humans have one powerful talent above all living things on earth. We can communicate with our language, not only making, oh, this is dangerous, or, oh, here's something wrong, but I can communicate to you what have happened 5,000 years ago. There is no animal, no tree, no plant, anything who can do that. And we can actually use the same language to transform our future by saying, in the future, it may look like this. And English is the de facto global language for communication. And everybody who is supporting it supports global conversations and also removing global miscommunication or misunderstanding. And size matters. We know that. And there was this big is beautiful. And then we said, oh, no, big is not big enough. We make it the globe, the universe, and then they come to faith, small is beautiful. And we realized that, like everything in nature, the balance is what really makes it happen. Agility, ability to innovate, and competitiveness is actually what we were looking about size. I mean, size in its own, whether it's small or big, doesn't really matter at all. But what does this size mean? Does it mean leverage? Does it mean that we can be more powerful, more intelligent, more agile, more innovative, more competitive? And we learn actually in the last couple of years with shifting in our economies. We learn it also with running a country in an epidemic, that a smaller size country is actually more powerful than a bigger size. And a smaller size country, when it makes a mistake, is also less damaging to the world. Sweden is a small size country, and Sweden thought, no, we let the virus go and have everybody being immune by taking it, and only a few will die, and so that was the risk they're taking. But the number of deaths is growing exponentially right now, really damaging. If this would be a larger country, and we see this actually in Brazil, the damage is even more earth-shattering. If this would be the world, and world domination is something that a couple countries here and there are actually playing with, it would be devastating to humanity. So I believe that if we're not looking for mega countries or mega organizations, we're in good shape. And that also represents companies. We have seen that the biggest, the theoretically, wealthiest companies are actually in the greatest danger right now because they are not innovative. And as we analyze them, we realize that innovation in a company that has more than 10 to 15,000 employees is actually very difficult. And companies with more than 100,000 employees, it's almost impossible to be innovative, at least with the tools we have today. And so we're trying to also help understand you entrepreneurs to not aim for a gigantic 100,000, 500,000 employee company, but maybe for a company in the 5 to 10,000 employee range, and actually give up on tools that you will barely be able to create versus let others create them and you purchase from them and make them innovative. Because you as the company owner, you may be innovative, but your team is typically not that innovative, because if they would start their own business. So now if we have that limitation, why don't distribute the power of production and the power of innovation to other smaller companies and then network together? We were looking into lands of opportunity. I mean, this is the term that was owned, so to speak, for a long time by the US. And we're seeing it's no longer the land of opportunity. It hasn't been the last almost 10 years now. And at the same time, other countries are on the rise. I mean, not at the stage as the US is right now, or has been, but it's very clear that new lands of opportunity are coming. And that term actually keeps changing over time. Because before the US, it was the UK, was the dominant country in 1900 across the planet. And if we get all this history back, we end up in Egypt about 5,000 years ago, when Egypt was the most dominant country in the world. So the question is, however, if that is the future, what will then be the next and the next and the next, or will there be less and less dominant nations in the future? And I believe it will, because there is no dominating anything object in the world made by nature as dominating. I think we're on a wrong track if we try to dominate others. And dominating is also something that we're seeing in our development work, that large NGOs try to dominate the process of what countries have to learn and have to do in order to survive and in order to be as good as somebody else. And we see for 40 years, there's countries that get development aid for 40 consecutive years and no development, because we cannot dominate somebody else. We just cannot. And somebody who is, at least in the Western world, not really a big friend, but I think is an amazing thinker and amazing driver for future of nations, has been Deng Xiaoping, the previous president from China, and I just learned a couple of weeks ago, his defining moment, so to speak, was when he said, it's not about government's effectiveness or efficiency, it's a question of policies. And I think this is something, after all I learned about governments, we should carry out into the countries, help the government, not arguing why and what they should do and how they should do and so on, but try to make them aware that a country like China, that has been an enemy for most of the Western countries and therefore have never received any development aid, has come the furthest way of all. $4 trillion development aid has been spent in all kinds of countries. The country that hasn't gotten anything was actually the winner. So with that, I believe the idea of policies within a country coming from within the society and within the culture is probably the thing that can make the biggest change and motivate people the most. With that said, I would like to actually point out something that I just heard basically 2 hours ago from Emmanuel Ndonga, 20 years old from Kenya, said, stop being pity about yourself. And it's funny, I heard this actually often before, not just in the context of countries, but actually within families and their kids, where they're, oh, everybody does this and everybody can do this, but not me. And it was so funny when you grow older and older and older, you heard the same story from all the kids, and then there's some who actually break through that barrier, and others continue being sorry. So I would explicitly ask you, stop being sorry or pity about yourself and how little you are and how shitty the situation is, excuse my language, how bad everything is. You will not, I promise you, you will not get out of it by being sorry about yourself and pointing to governments and anybody else. There is no government in the world that will help you to become what you think you want to have or be. It's only you yourself. And so J.F. Kennedy said once in the US that has actually gone through the entire country still today, don't ask what the country can do for you. Ask instead what you can do for the country. Because the country is you. The sum of you is the country. And so therefore, I also ask you one thing, and I learned this also during my last 2 years of running this organization. Stop taking donations. Donations is poison. Donations is heroin to an emerging country. 40 years of donations have killed nations. And we've seen one single entrepreneur in Nepal to break through that. They made it without actually donations. Why? Because everything they did, it was driven by a goal of being a real company standing on their own feet. And yes, there were some wealthy people involved, but it was within the country and not donations. And I talked to people who totally agree with me. And then we worked on some concept, and they come afterwards and said, we can actually get donations from this and that. We can get grants here and grants there. And I thought, what did we talk about the last hour? Stop taking donations. And there's one country that has done this publicly with enormous power at the end of their process, and that is South Korea. Within 10 years after the government stated, we will not take donations, but we will actually be, in this year, somebody who actually donates to other countries. That changed the culture of this country entirely. And if your country doesn't have that yet, then it's you, because you're part of the country. You make it happen. And also, we as an organization, we reject to do donations. The hardest part, trust me, the hardest part was, again, in Nepal. There was a team who couldn't get started with a company because there were $20 missing. For somebody like me who, spent $20 without even thinking, it was the hardest to not give these $20. because I thought, come on, you can't do this. I mean, why? But I thought, no, you can't give it, because you will continue to feeding heroin in this sense of the culture. And so here we see country Singapore. I believe at the grand scheme of things, this is the leading country of the world today. And the country is the sum of their people. And they're about 0.01% who have the courage to build that. And actually, when I was in Singapore the first time in my life in 1980, all of this, what you see here on the screen, did not exist. There was a couple first of the high rises, and the rest was as flat as the little. I think it's part of the old China part, little houses. And I was taught, if you drive with a tram or with a bus, you risk to get in jail if you pee into the bus. And I thought, what? I would never pee in the bus. What is this? And I said, I mean, people do this all the time, and we needed to stop it. Jail for peeing in the bus. I mean, I thought, this is crazy. I mean, can't you tell people what to do and not to do? I mean, that this is not okay. Well, no, you cannot. So every culture and every country has their own rules and their own ways of evolution and development. And we from the outside, we're damned to say a thing. I mean, we cannot. It's totally not appropriate. And if people beat women in a nation that is not part of our culture, we do not have the right, even though it's terrible to look. It's terrible to have that happening. But unless the country or the culture ask for help, we should not invent and not go into it. And so this is a terrible situation where we are in, but we have to build respect for these nations, any nation. And so this is why we cannot also as an organization just walk in and say, okay, this is what you need to learn. And another thing, I just want to end this part, because this was the morning part, with the request from Ashwin, actually ambassadors getting more together. Absolutely, we do this, we did that, and we will do this in July. We haven't announced it yet, but we will send the invitation and so on out. And what we also want to do, and that was a clear request from somebody else, I don't remember exactly who was it, was a team meeting. I mean, we have roughly 100 people as teams in each of the countries, so 100 together. And we definitely want to work closer with the teams, because we have only one single objective: finding top-notch entrepreneurs who can build basically the foundation of a country. We don't want to wait for government. We don't want to wait for policy, even though they're new and that would be good. We don't want to argue about corruption, because we can do this for the next 100 years. We need to get the country off the ground, and then corruption actually will stop on its own. And that has been the pattern over the last 5,000 years. So yes, we will do that. And in order to get countries off the ground, we have learned a lot in this last year since we founded the foundation. And I want to share with you a little bit about the entrepreneurial background. I know I look at my clock, I'm a little bit late, but just give you a couple things that I think you need to know. Education. And we learned it from Matis. I mean, there are founders that have been top educated and others had not. What I'm saying is not that you don't need education and you should not. No, if you have it, I mean, all blessed to you, this is very good. But there is no need to have a degree to become a successful entrepreneur. It is helpful, no question, but there is no need. And there are many entrepreneurs who have not gotten any major education. The one thing, however, and that is across the world, we see this over and over and over again, is this stupid thing called English. I mean, for some people say, I mean, would you prefer English or a science degree in technology and AI to build a product? I would say English. I mean, it's funny, but you cannot deal on a global market. You're always bound and always dependent on others who speak the language that translate it for you. So English is one of the educational requirements for being a successful entrepreneur. Skills. There are no special skills. I get this question over and over and over again. There's basically one ability, and that is finding people with the skills you need to fulfill your dreams. But you don't have to do it yourself. And the less skills you have, I have to tell you that, the better it is for the company. Because as soon as you do things yourself, you will lose oversight. You will. And therefore, entrepreneurs who are deep dive engineers, they can build amazing products. And we have them seen and met, and we know them, I mean, literally all over the country, all over the planet. But they're also, in a certain way, a roadblock, because then you're so busy building what you want to build, and you continue to build and you build forever, but you never sell it. Heritage, none. It doesn't matter where you come from, what color, what family, rich or poor, hardworking or lazy. It really doesn't matter. Actually, lazy is better. There was once an interview with Bill Gates, and he said, what is the one thing where you prefer most? And he was smiling and said, you know what, I have to be honest, I was very lazy, and everything I did was based on laziness. And I would prefer lazy people over the super busiest and constantly busy. And that was sort of the way he explained it. And so lazy is better. So that means heritage doesn't matter. And if you see all the top entrepreneurs of the world and have lined them up and asked them, their background and everything, you would see that all of this is not a pattern of success. The question is, what is then the pattern of success? Is there any? And we thought for a long time, honestly, there is none. But then all of a sudden we realized, when we look for startups, I mean, this was back in the accelerator days, there are a couple things we're continuously looking for. And this is for fearless people who are taking risks. If you're not fearless, if you're careful and you don't want to take too much risk, well, that is one of the 10 things that make you a not entrepreneur. And this list is not kind of, okay, a little bit of this and that, maybe not, and then there are others maybe should be. No, as an entrepreneur or as an entrepreneurial team, this is what you have to have. The bold white ones is a must-have, and if a single one is not there, I would recommend, don't waste your time trying to be a startup entrepreneur because so many people do that. Try to find what your heart is for. This is like a car. I mean, come on, this is a car. No tires, it's one of the things. Yeah, but it doesn't work without tires. No motor, it doesn't work without motor. No steering wheel, you can't steer it. Brakes missing. Oh, shoot. I mean, we need brakes. So it's one of these stupid things humans do, is try to have at least some of them, and then the rest will work somehow. It mostly doesn't. So fearless, creative, fast thinker, determined. You never give up. Okay, the company seems to be broke. We have no more money. I think we have to give up. An entrepreneur would not give up, never. Curiosity. There's some cultures where curiosity is sort of, why are you so curious? This is my business, not your business. No, people want to know. They want to know everything. They want to know how people think, how people work, how people have fun or no fun, and so on. And this is where ideas come from. I mean, unique ideas to actually fix problems people have. Without curiosity, it doesn't work. Intelligent. And intelligence is unfortunately still an undefined term at the end of the day. There are intelligence tests, one is so and one is so. But in general, it's a problem solver. And if you can solve a problem just by thinking through all the permutation without experimenting it, then you're considered at least by most of the scientists, to be intelligent. Confident. You have no doubt. There are situations when I started a company where I come to and said, okay, what is the final risk, the real risk? And if I know there is no doubt anymore in me, not even in the back of my head, then this is something I can go for. And I did also other things that I did have doubts, and I thought, yeah, maybe I can overcome these. But these companies didn't work or didn't work as well. Independent. If you're dependent from others, anybody, anything, you cannot be an entrepreneur. If you're totally independent, it doesn't matter what people think, what they do, what they had in mind, and also independent of financial resources. If you cannot do your thing without money from somebody else who is an investor, you are not an entrepreneur, as hard as it sounds, and people would not believe, but you're not. Involving, get others people involved in what you're having. And then there are two things, connectiveness and communication. That is something you need in a startup, but if you don't have that, and that might be true, then you have to have a co-founder who does it. And I see Douglas waving, so to speak. Hey, you're over time. Just real quick. So we're looking for entrepreneurs in these countries, and I showed this before, so I can skip it. Think big, think space. Space is what we started, and this is where I want to finish, is that we need to think big as the universe. And so is also our educational program. We want you to work on your things that are as big as the universe. And there is one thing, and we learned this actually today from another speaker, is entrepreneurial education. And there's a lot of controversial discussions, and people say, no, let them figure it out. They are the young one. They're the next generation. They do things differently. So let them go. There's a small piece of island actually in the world, and this is what you see here, San Francisco, Silicon Valley. And this is the only one where you have total dedication to entrepreneurship education. And it worked for the last 50 years extremely well. So I'm wholeheartedly believe we cannot let young entrepreneurs figure out everything. I mean, they figure out their solution, and we shouldn't talk about, how they should build it or not build it or do things. But we should help them with what I call the universal mechanisms of entrepreneurship, and that's as old as 5,000 years ago. And there is even secret societies like, I think, what is it called? The Masons. The Masons had a way to help their other people to actually help them understand how to get things done. And that back then was secretive. I mean, today we're very public with what we're doing. We don't want to be a secret society. Jesus, not at all. But giving the next generation everything you learned on top of what they are learning. This is why what you see on this picture is even possible, building high rises and bridges and airplanes and having internet and everything. It's because one puts it on top of the other. And if we don't educate our entrepreneurs as good as we humanly can, we fail. Now, I had to give my lead investor a promise. If you're successful, you will need, as part of this clan of entrepreneurs, you will need to help others to get to the same success, because this is how humanity actually continues to evolve. And this is what we're doing, and this is why we're existing with our new Innopreneurs Academy, where we do one thing and one thing only, helping entrepreneurs to grow. And you can go at wiforum.org, IP Academy, and register yourself, and we're happy to help you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Axel.